Hi, I'm Giles P Croft. I'm a coach and trainer. In a former life, I was an NHS surgeon. I left many years ago and pursued all sorts of exciting alternative careers, and in doing so, really got to grips with the human experience, and that's what I share with people these days, helping them to really see deeply how they're experiencing the world and who they really are.
Wow, who they really are. Well, we've got deep already, haven't we, Charles? Who are you really?
It's the question to ask.
It is the question, isn't it? But anyway, it's really great to have you back on the podcast. Thank you for coming back. And you've been on.
Thanks.
You've been on before.
Have I got the record yet?
I think you almost have. There might be a couple of people you're nudging up there. I know we've talked about alcohol before. We've talked about stress a few times. And I know that whenever you're on, Giles, you're always quite thought-provoking, maybe slightly controversial. And I like the take that you have on stuff. It really has made me think differently. And you were well overdue coming back. But I think between the time when I last spoke to you, you've had something quite significant happen to you, haven't you?
Yes, indeed. So on the 4th of July last year, I had a TIA completely out of the blue, with absolutely no risk factors whatsoever. Gosh, and so that was a bit of a shock.
For the non-medical listeners, TIA, transient ischemic attack, right?
Exactly, a mini stroke. So it's all the symptoms of a stroke, but then because it's as a result of a blood clot that then clears itself, all the symptoms had completely resolved. Yeah, in sort of 24 hours later, I was back to normal as I'll ever be.
So what actually happened at the time?
I woke up with it. I woke up, and as I so often do, I picked up my phone. And I was scrolling through my RSS feed, how I get all my news, and it wasn't making any sense to me. I was seeing words, and I remember quite distinctly reading one particular article and having the thought, I should really care about this. This is something that I really want to read, and like opening the article and looking at it and just like having absolutely no interest in it whatsoever, because it just didn't make any sense to me. And so anyway, I went back to sleep, and then got up, and it wasn't really until I went downstairs and when I opened my mouth, a whole load of gobbledygook came out, even more than usual, Rachel, before you say it.
I was just about to get in there with that.
Sorry for stealing your thunder there. Yeah, it's kind of like word salad came out of my mouth, and it was a real shock, and to both me and my wife. And every time I opened my mouth, I knew what I wanted to say, but the words came out all wrong. It was weird. It was like real words squashed together, and this obviously shocked us both considerably. I asked my wife last night, I was like, I've got to go on a podcast and talk about this. I can't really remember a great deal about it, but you know, how was it for you, baby? And she's like, well, you know, obviously it was a worry. She said it was also very frustrating. She said, because you weren't taking it seriously. She said you just kept saying, well, let's just, you know, let's see how it goes. Coincidentally, I was due to, and you couldn't make this up, I was due to meet my oldest buddy from medical school who I hadn't seen for a while, and she's still an A&E doctor, and it was her day off. So I thought, well, I've got to phone her. So I phoned her and left a message because she didn't answer, and she phoned back not long after. And in talking to me, she was like, I think you're having a stroke. Can you get Ginevra, my wife, to drive you to A&E where I work? And I think it's really important that you get there as quickly as possible. So yeah, off I went to A&E. the symptoms were an inability to really comprehend language all that well. It was really hard to do the simplest of tasks. It was really hard to answer questions from my wife. It took incredible amounts of effort to do that. I had lost my right peripheral vision. It's not that it wasn't there, it's just that it was mush. So that was another symptom. And then the speech thing, no other like mechanical symptoms really. So they kept a close eye. I was scanned from head to toe. They didn't find any particular cause or anything. And as the day went by, it slowly but surely improved. And then by the next morning, woke up and everything was completely back to normal. So it was quite the adventure.
Gosh, yeah, and what a worrying thing to happen. And I'm just going to check, because obviously lots of medics listening to this. You've had your scans, you're on aspirin, right?
Yeah, I'm on clopidogrel now.
Okay, good. So you're on stuff that's not going to happen to you again. But
yeah.
So obviously something was happening in your left brain, affecting your right vision, affecting your speech and all that sort of thing. And I'm really interested in the fact that you appeared not to be taking it that seriously. I mean, how are you actually feeling at the time then?
So it was fascinating. And I mean, for those of you who don't know the work I do, I spend a lot of my time seemingly dissing the left brain, dissing the analytical brain, and encouraging people to live more from their right brain consciousness that I'm sure we'll get onto shortly. In terms of how I was feeling, I would be aware of worrisome thoughts, but even more than usual. And I'm pretty self-aware about worrying thought when it comes up these days, but even more than normal. There was almost like a detached kind of, what an utterly pointless thought to have. Every time I was sat there in a chair in a corridor, like waiting for an MRI scan or something on my own, given what was going on, you'd think there would be a lot of worry, but there wasn't much at all. And then every now and again, it would be like my left brain would sort of drag itself back and go, what about the rest of your life? And it was so obvious that was just an output of the computer mind doing what it does, just trying to make sense of things. So it was even easier than normal to be pretty present to it all. I was kind of like taking in what was going on around me. Yeah, it was just sort of took it one moment at a time.
That is really fascinating. So it's a bit like revenge of the left brain. Your left brain saying, well, you keep telling people that I'm not important. So shall I just show you that actually we do have quite an important function here. The left cortex and the left amygdala and stuff like that. But I guess your main message, and what I'm increasingly realising, is that we just let it dominate, don't we?
We do. We've got so used to living in it and living from it that we've lost sight of the fact that there is something much, much bigger that underpins, surrounds, something all-encompassing, of which that left brain output is a teeny, tiny little part of that experience. And yet, because it's so insistent, and of course it's got all our stuff in it, hasn't it? It's got all of our experience, it's got all of our memory, it knows all the right buttons to press and everything, but it's just doing its job. It doesn't even know it doesn't know there's anything outside of it, so it thinks it's the boss. That's the key, is that it thinks it's the boss. It thinks it's what's looking after you, what's keeping you safe. When it's just this little computer thing, with a data in, data out model. It's just running its little algorithms and going, oh, I know what's going on. And it's like, no, you don't.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? So what I have realised, over the years, and also by hearing your story. And I went back to listen to Jill Bolte Taylor's story as well. So for those people that haven't come across Jill Bolte Taylor, go and Google her TED Talk. It's called A Stroke of Insight. I think it's like the second most listened to TED Talk ever. And she was a neuroanatomist who ended up having a left brain stroke, which completely took out almost the whole of her left hemisphere, actually. And so she was just left with the right brain. And she described something quite similar to you, Giles, but it was a bit more extreme, wasn't it? So she wouldn't have even been able to read, let alone realised that she wasn't taking the words in. And then it took her 8 years to rehabilitate from that stroke. And she's now fully functioning, but realised exactly what it was that her right brain gave her. And what the right brain gave her was this sense of presence. So the right brain only knows the present moment, doesn't it? And it is able to think much, much more creatively. It responds to connection. And what she said when she had her stroke, that she found it very difficult to work out where she finished and where the rest of the world started. And so she just felt like she was part of this great big thing. The interesting thing I heard on a podcast I've heard with her recently is she said that she also didn't really have any memory of who people were and what they'd done to her in the past. So she couldn't be hacked off with anyone because, you know, firstly, she didn't really know who her mum was, which was sad, but then she couldn't be cross with her mum for doing anything because she couldn't remember that. And she hadn't tied those negative emotions to things that her mother had done. So the right brain doesn't really have a sense of timing, doesn't it? It's very much just in the present, whereas the left brain, we are always looking forwards, we're looking back, and the left amygdala is constantly scanning for threats. What is going to stop us living, essentially? And is someone going to threaten us? Are they not? And consequently, we problem solve. And I think medics tend to incredible amount, but I think most of us in our society now have overdeveloped this left brain. So we think we can think our way out of problems that actually originate with feelings. So you're trying to solve the wrong problem with the wrong solution, or just on a completely different level. Now, is that a reasonable summary? Is there anything you would add to that? Any inconsistencies?
I don't know if you've come across Ian McGilchrist's work at all.
The Master in His Emissary.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, and it's an absolute. I think it's probably the biggest, other than my ICD-10 I've got here. It's, I think it's the biggest book I own. For listeners, rather than subjecting yourself to something like a 24-hour long audiobook, there's an hour and 20-minute documentary video version of The Master and His Emissary called The Divided Brain. If you go to thedividedbrain.com, I think you have to either rent it or buy it off Vimeo, but it really summarises the book perfectly. And there's a line in that documentary where Ian McGilchrist is with I think it's a drama group or something, and the guy who's running the drama group asks him, would you summarise the difference between the left and the right hemispheric experiences? And the guy says, what I like about it is that this right hemispheric consciousness that we're talking about, he says, it's not necessarily knowable. And Ian McGilchrist jumps in straight away and he says, it's more than that. He says, it's necessarily not knowable. I'm like, oh my word. Because you and I, we can talk about it until the cows come home, but we can only use the tools of the left brain to try and describe something that is not it. So this right brain consciousness, it's more real than reality in some ways. It's why McGilchrist calls his book The Master and his emissaries, because the right brain's the master. The right brain knows all, it sees all, it's connected to the oneness of life. It's the source of creativity and insight and all the good stuff. But it can't get involved in the process of separation of objects. So it farms all of that stuff out to the left brain. And the left brain does all of its dividing. I mean, that the thing about the Jill Bolte Taylor story, when she says, she was slumped against the wall and she couldn't tell where her arm ended and where the wall began. That's because the left brain creates a very helpful illusion of separation for us. You know, it's incredibly helpful, as I discovered on that fateful day when it's like, oh, I'm going to stop slagging off the left brain quite as much as I do, because boy, can you not do without it. You know, you really can't do without it. But yeah, as you said, it's the fact that we've completely lost sight of our right brain consciousness when it's a lot closer to who we are than what the left brain tells us, which is all essentially made up.
Wow, that's a really good explanation of it. So I've just written down here, the left brain is a little bit like the sort of assistant, the admin assistant to the right brain.
Yeah.
But it's when the left brain starts thinking that its little ways of doing things and what it thinks is right, or what other people have told them it's right, that is the thing.
It thinks it's the whole.
Yeah.
The left brain thinks it's the whole. Because it can't ever know anything. I don't know if you've read any of Eckhart Tolle's stuff, the Power of Now, and he says the mind, and you know, because we there's just a whole load of metaphors and synonyms we've got here, but you can call the left brain the mind or our personal thinking,
it the ego?
Or the chimp, or whatever,
or
the ego.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. It makes an enemy of the present moment because it's almost like the present moment, our right brain consciousness, it almost by definition is the absence of ego. It's the absence of personal thinking. It's the absence of analysis. It is just experiencing life as it is here and now without any of the labelling going on that the left brain does of right and wrong and good and bad and all that malarkey.
So is that why meditation and all those sorts of things are so helpful for us? Because it helps us get rid of the ego and the thinking and stuff and helps us stay more present to that right brain?
Yeah, absolutely. It's why people meditate. It's why people meditate. It's kind of almost sort of like brute forcing your way into it. And it's why, you know, meditation, some people like it and other people abhor it. I mean, between you and me, I just can't be bothered meditating. It's like, well, it's just like, but I would say I live in a largely meditative state, I suppose. You know, there's a difference between having a meditation practice and living meditatively is what I'm trying to say, I think, you know, because for me, the awareness of how it all works is enough. I mean, what else do you need? Why would I need to sit in a dark room trying to let go of my thoughts when I can just be more aware? It's like, well, yeah, that's a load of nonsense from the left brain, isn't it? I don't need to take any of that seriously and just get on with my life and not sit quietly for however long I'm supposed to sit quietly for. Crack on with my life. Gosh,
well, Giles, I mean, I think you obviously cracked it. Lesser mortals like me need a little bit of practice at that whole meditation thing. It's interesting. I'm doing an MBSR course, mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and yeah, it's really interesting, and they do talk about it as a practice. So we've got to do like 40 minutes of meditation a day for the next 8 weeks, and you start off with a body scan, and then you move on. And the whole point of it, and actually we've been looking up the literature about that, and does it work, and all that sort of stuff. And there's no doubt that MBSR works, but actually any meditative practice for longer than about 25 minutes a day works, because what you're doing is you're practicing those neural networks rewiring to be able to get into that right brain and be less reactive. So it's great if you're someone that can just do that, but I think for some of us it's a bit of a skill. But I think even recognizing the thoughts and the patterns. I was away with a bunch of people, and someone said to me, we were on a retreat, we were talking about mindset and all that, and somebody said to me, I don't understand, can you explain what you mean when you say our thoughts aren't true or our thoughts aren't facts? And I was quite taken aback by that, because I think it's, having been in this sort of space now of the coaching and the training, the resilience stuff we do, I've learned that. But I think actually, yes, 5 years ago, I would have just absolutely 100% believed that my thoughts are true and that they are facts. And I think in the medical world, we just believe that. And at no point has anyone told us anything differently. So all this stuff I know it's starting to come through into the mainstream now, but it's still quite foreign to all of us. I
mean, I'm a strong believer that it's our next evolutionary step. You know, it is to see through our own thinking. It's the fact that there are more and more people like work in this way. You know, I've got so many colleagues who work in this exact same way. The key for me when it comes to the like a meditative practice and a meditative state is really seeing, and I use the word seeing advisedly. It like really kind of like getting it in your bones, seeing insightfully, really, that meditative state, that right brain consciousness experience, that's our default. I think that wasn't our first podcast, didn't you call it default to happy? That's our default. And when we really see that, because we're all walking around thinking that the left brain experience, that the busy-minded experience, that the intellectual experience, that the analytical experience, that the computer mind experience, that's the default. And every now and again, we kind of luck out, you know, like we get out of bed one day and we're having a good day, and and again, the mind, because the mind doesn't really know what's going on in those situations, it very naturally, very understandably has to pin it on something. It goes, oh, I know why you're feeling so good. It's because of ABC, which is the illusory activity of the mind. It's got to try and pin every single feeling that we have onto a circumstance. So that, you know, that's what it does. But once we see that our default is clarity, that our default is calm, that our default is, well, basically being in reality being the present moment. I mean, everything that's not now, categorically, is imagination. You know, it's as simple as that. Everything that's not now is imagination, and so we're built to, as human beings, as far as I can tell, we're built to thrive in reality. We're built to thrive in the present moment. And that's when all of the skills that we've learned and everything that that we've put into our little left brain thought system, it all comes to bear in the present moment. And then you've almost like got this extra layer of nonsense laid over the top of it, a bit going, bah, 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 bah. You know, like the sort of DVD commentary track. Well, this is what Giles is doing now, and Giles thinks this, and yeah, Giles is making all the decisions here, and I'm in charge, and you know, and once you've seen through that, the need, I suppose, the need to try and deal with that through meditation or whatever, you know, meditation's one way of dealing with it, as we've discussed before. Drinking alcohol is another brilliant way of dealing with it. You know, it's not quite as wholesome and healthy and acceptable as meditation. But you know, all of these habits we have are all essentially trying to bring us back to the now, trying to bring us back to who we really are.
Yeah. And I'm really interested in what you said about this being a next step of evolution, because I read Jill Bolte-Taylor's new book, which I think is called Whole Brain Thinking, which is fantastic. I'd recommend it to anyone. And she's talking about the fact that our left brain is an evolution already. So everybody's got an amygdala. I think, you know, lizards have an amygdala, but what mammals then have is that sort of frontal cortex where you sort of attach meaning to the threat that's coming at you. But then humans have developed that even more, sort of have the illusion of time. Well, not the illusion of time, knowing that we live in time, knowing that we are finite. And so what our left amygdala is constantly trying to do is just to keep us safe, is to keep us safe in time by driving us, by making sure we've got enough money, and not just enough money, but loads and loads of money, and make sure we're really, really, really successful so that nothing goes wrong for us and it keeps us alive for longer, is our illusion. Yeah. But then...
And then you have a TIA, Rachel.
And then you go...
and then it's like, oh, no, I'm not in control here.
And
it's
illusion.
It's completely out of my hands.
Illusion that we are in control, really, of much in the world is just... is just bonkers, isn't it? But I think, you know, that really made sense to me, that our left brain is constantly trying to keep us safe, but not happy. Safe does not necessarily mean happy. It means that we see threats all the time when there isn't one. And most of the worries I have are stuff that, quite frankly, aren't going to happen. And I love the quote by Mark Twain, I think it was, "I'm an old man, I've known loads of troubles, but most of them haven't happened." Yeah. And what I love about Jill Bolte-Taylor's book is, well, I like it because it's pretty scientific. It talks about your left brain consisting of your midbrain, your brain stem that keeps you breathing. You've got your midbrain, your amygdala, your hippocampus, you've got your frontal cortex. And you've got that on both sides. So what I didn't realise was that you've also got a right amygdala. And the right amygdala is also a threat detection system. But whereas the left one is like, what's going to happen in the future? And keeps you anxious. The right amygdala is just like, oh, am I cold? Is there a tiger attacking me? It's really, really present to present threats. Absolutely. If there's a tiger coming, you run away. But then it's just fine again. So your right amygdala is much more sensible than the left one, which just keeps us worried. So I think she described it as the right one is fear and the left one is anxiety. Because fear is like normal fear. It's like actual fear of, yes, that if I jump off that cliff, I'm going to die. Whereas the left brain isn't. And so what she talks about in her book is being able to access not just your left amygdala and your left thinking bit, frontal cortex, but your right one as well, and your right thinking bit. And if we can actually ask each of those bits of our brain for advice about certain situations, rather than just the left amygdala, which is I think what most of us just do, then life would be a lot easier. And she actually gets you to name each brain and go, what would Hillary say about this, or what would Gerald say? I don't know. Have you named your brain, Giles?
No, I did like the book, and I think if you're new to looking in this direction, as we say, then it's a great way in. And like you say, I think it's especially good for scientists because you've got all that, she's a neuroanatomist and everything. For me, I find it sort of unnecessarily complicated.
Okay.
Just because what I want is to have as little on my mind as possible. The last thing I want to be doing is, in a situation is forcing myself to think more about anything. Like, okay, so hang on a minute, is this left amygdala or right amygdala? And I think, in the book, she's quite upfront about, well, this isn't an exact science. There's a huge overlap. So, there are many, many more metaphors that we can use, and as you know, I'm a simple man. I just like to keep it as simple as possible, and it's like, well, we're either in life, we're either fully present to what's going on, we're connected to life itself, in that flow of life, letting it live us. Connected to wisdom and the oneness of life and others, the bigger picture, or we're being distracted from that by the left brain output, by the computer mind and all of its analysis. Because again, with that right brain consciousness being the default, with oneness is a fact. The physicists will tell you that. You can't not be a part of the oneness of life. All that can happen is that we can get distracted from that fact by the left brain and the separation, and lose sight of reality, of being a wave on the ocean. Can't be separate from the ocean. You're a wave on the ocean.
So, Giles, what would your tips be then for just when you're in that moment, when you're overthinking stuff on your left brain, to getting into your right brain? What has helped?
I can tell you what doesn't help, and that's telling me that it's my thinking.
It's just your thinking. It's just your thinking that's causing you problems, Giles. Just get over it, right?
Yeah.
Stop thinking.
Yeah, that really doesn't work because, as human beings, we're constantly fluctuating these sort of different levels of consciousness. 1 minute a problem looks like a really massive problem, and then half an hour later, material circumstances haven't changed in the slightest, and yet I'm at a different level of consciousness, if you like, and maybe I've had an insight or I've got a bit of perspective on the situation, and all of a sudden it's not a problem. So I think in the moment, if you're struggling, then you do your best. You just do your best and understand that you can only ever do what makes sense to you. You know, we're only ever going to respond. We're run by this programming in the mind, and sometimes we see that, and so we don't really engage it all that much, and we're more in the flow of life. And other times we don't really see that. Like me too, you know, I get het up by stuff and get anxious about stuff, but I just don't take any of it seriously because I know what it is. So yeah, in the moment you do your best, and you know that it's going to pass. I did a recent episode of Wellbeing Wednesdays. I'm just editing it at the moment. I did it last week on depression, and there was a wonderful, I shared like a podcast episode of somebody talking about their experience of depression, kind of like before having seen this and then after having seen it. And they said, I know that I will never experience depression like I did before. And the podcast host was like, that's a bit of a bold claim, isn't it? and he said, well, no, he says, because I've seen that my well-being is ever present, that even if I lose sight of it, even if I lose sight of that, again, if I lose sight of that right brain experience, because I'm so deep in analysis, I know that it's not gone anywhere. I know I can't be separate from it. It's an illusion. And it's just the knowing, the like really having it in your bones, that makes all the difference. Anytime I'm upset about anything, it's like, oh, I'm upset about something right now. Okay. And then I know that in 10 minutes time I won't be upset about something, and that's fine too. It's knowing that, you know, there's nothing about our experience to be feared. Like my greatest mentor, the Scottish mystic Sydney Banks, his most famous quote that gets trotted out is like, if the only thing we learned was not to be afraid of our experience, that alone would change the world.
It's interesting. Unlike you, I do find I get very tied up in my left brain. And even if I say to myself, you're just thinking, it's all fine, I still can find that sort of knot in my stomach and that knot in my chest, knowing that there's something going on. And I've even sometimes, you know, woken up, felt that knot in my chest, being completely relaxed, and thought, oh, why is that knot in there? And you then sieve through your thoughts, think, well, what is it? What is that anxious about?
It goes.
Yeah, exactly. And it is hard. And I think, first of all, just being aware of the fact it is your thinking that's doing it. But I think that is probably where some of these techniques, like just grounding yourself, you know, putting your feet on the ground, getting into your body, a few grounded breaths. I talk a lot about pressing the pause button, just, you know, all those things. Getting out into nature is very good, isn't it? Because it just gets perspective on stuff. And you're like, okay, no, this is nature. This is amazing. I'm just this tiny little speck down here. And so there are all these things along with the meditative practices as well. For
me, like the really helpful thing to see is that in any moment that comes along, and I said it already, is that we're gonna do what makes sense, and it's going to be based on our level of consciousness in that moment. Okay, so if we're feeling het up and we really are in a very low mood and we're not seeing things clearly, then our behavior will match that. Wisdom will speak to us. Wisdom will do its absolute best, and if that includes reaching for the bottle, then that's what we're going to do. And you know, that's just the way it is from where we are at that very moment. Or it might say, you know, well, you know, let's go out for a walk or something. Or it might say, you might just have this urge to put on a piece of music or something. I mean, I love cooking and stuff. You know, I've had situations before when I've been really, really up in my head about something and just slowed down enough to not start cooking as a way of fixing it, but all of a sudden I found myself. It's almost like if you can let intuition guide you, if you can really, you know, if the thought occurs to you, well, I should maybe, I feel like listening to a particular song, put the bloody song on, you know?
Yeah.
If the thought occurs to you, oh, do you know what? I haven't cooked cooked a curry for ages. I might nip off down the supermarket, get down the supermarket and do it. That's called listening to your intuition, because wisdom's always speaking to us in any moment. We're always trying to get back. As far as I can tell, the system is built to bring us back into balance all the time. We don't have to do anything. We just have to listen.
Yeah. So, Giles, I've got a question. I was going to ask you, where does this leave our left brain? Because, of course, the left brain is really important because we need people that are going to make vaccines, for example. Yeah. And then I thought, well, maybe that's a bit of a stupid question, because maybe it isn't all the left brain which comes up with the ideas. And then I started thinking, well, where does that fit with creativity and stuff? And then I started thinking, well, I know I have my best ideas and my best thinking when I am relaxed and in my right brain as well. So that's the question. So creativity, problem solving, doing this stuff, is that the left brain or the right brain, or is it actually when the two work in harmony together? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite authors, Richard Carlson, the author of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, he talks about putting problems on the back burner. We've been taught to use our analytical mind for problem solving, but it doesn't really work like that, because as you've correctly identified, and I would invite everybody listening to this podcast not to believe a word that either me or Rachel are saying here, and look to your own experience, because that's the only way that change is going to happen. This isn't something that you take on as a belief. It's not like, oh, well, they said that I should do this and that and the other. It doesn't work like that at all. It's looking to your own experience and saying, oh, yeah, I do get my best ideas when I'm in the shower, out walking the dog, just as I'm nodding off or just as I'm waking up. If you ask, in fact, I do when I run my workshops, it's one of the first questions I ask people is, when do you get your best ideas? And it's a very small pool of answers that come back every single time. And I'm like, well, guys, what do you make of that? We could spend the rest of the 6-week course just literally talking about that, because that's it. Life itself delivers the answers to everything. And that whole left brain personal thinking thing, again, it's almost like a vestigial digit or something these days. I think it's like, again, which is why I think it's the way that we're headed as a species. If we're going to survive as a species, this is the next step that we need to take. Yes,
it's interesting. I'm thinking there's probably not a single listener that will say, I get my best ideas when I'm really hurried and time pressured and rushing to get through things. Yeah. But I guess what you need to be able to access your right brain for the creativity and the problem solving, and then the left brain helps you then put that into action, doesn't it?
It's the emissary. If you can see it as this, just like, it's almost like having, I mean, you mentioned a personal assistant, and I'm sure I've said before, it's like having Siri in your head or Alexa in your head or something. It's like, if you can see it for what it is, which is just a computer that you can use, but like, don't go looking for good feelings in it, and don't go looking for your well-being in it, because it ain't there. It's just not there. You're looking in the wrong place. What we're all searching for, that sense of self and that sense of peace of mind, there's literally only one place that you're ever going to find that, and that's now. Everything else is imagination. Everything else is the left brain saying, oh, well, I'll be happy when. It's a story.
That's so true. This is why I guess I found that book, Jill Bolte-Taylor's book, quite helpful, because when I am in my left brain, if it just stops me and go, right, let me just ask my right amygdala and my right brain what they would do here. It's like, okay. Yeah, no, that would help. So sometimes if you want to think your way out of it, it will help you just be aware of what you need to do. And then you can go, right, okay, but in order to ask that, I probably need to stop being so stressed here and just relax a bit and actually put it on the back burner so that my right brain gets a chance to work. We did a podcast quite recently with John C. Parkin. I think it's called How to Be Ridiculously Relaxed. And his theory is that man can achieve greatness if one is ridiculously relaxed,
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's so true, but we do not prioritise being relaxed. maybe we just need to tell everyone, if you're ridiculously relaxed, you'll be really productive and stuff, and then that will encourage people to do it, right?
But that's true, though, isn't it?
It's so
that's
true.
true.
It's
true. It's like I know for a fact I'm at my most productive when I'm relaxed and carefree, and I get to the end of the day and I'm like, whoa, there's no way I thought I'd have got all that stuff done. And it's when I'm in the story about what it all means and how bloody awful it's going to be and what's going to happen as a result and all that story, that's when I find myself, grinding my gears, spinning my wheels.
I'm just thinking of lots of people listening to this podcast would say, but Giles, you talk about a story, but it is true. It is true that we don't have enough doctors, and I've got a massive complaint against me, and I haven't got enough time to see all these patients, and we can't recruit, and I can't do this. So all those stories are true, and these stresses are really real.
We're not denying circumstances here, but what we're looking at is our experience of those circumstances. And just like we are so often most productive when we're in our default state of calm, clear-headedness, when it comes to circumstances that we have to deal with, it's no coincidence that we're all also at our best in those circumstances when we're calm and clear-headed. And seeing that good ideas and solutions to problems, including what to do about a difficult work situation or, a relationship with a colleague or something, when we see that the solutions to those problems also come from that same place, they don't come from analysis. Again, I'd invite listeners to examine their own experience. If you've got something that's been bothering you for a while, if you were going to figure it out with your left brain, wouldn't you have done it by now? Wouldn't you have done it by now?
And I was just thinking, in all those circumstances, worrying about a complaint, worrying about not being able to recruit too many people, often what you can say is, well, I'm okay now. Things are okay now.
Always. I'm
okay now. Might not be in future because there's this big thing coming up, but then you never know what's going to happen in the future, right? I think that's my You're Not a Frog first rule of worrying is the things that you worry about pretty much don't happen. And it's the things that you don't worry about, that's the shit that happens to you.
Yeah. So, like TIAs.
Yeah, like TIAs, like things that come completely left field. You would never have predicted were going to happen. That this life will be full of troubles, and it is full of troubles. And worrying about them really doesn't make them go away or worse. In fact, it just makes the rest of your life really crappy as well, right?
And I mean, when you see that the only thing that we have that can even label something as a trouble, it's the left brain again. There are no troubles. That's when you get pretty deep. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, this thing that I'm seeing as a problem, it's again literally the only tool that we have at our disposal that can even separate an object out and give it a label of a problem. And again, look to your own experience. I'm sure every listener has been through a situation in their life when they first learned about it, they were like, oh my God, this is the most terrible thing that could possibly happen to me. And then not long after, or maybe a long time after, I don't know, that same situation looks completely different. I mean, when I left surgery all those years ago, the situation that I found myself in was awful. It was terrible. And I was like, for ages, I was like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And it really wasn't long after that I was like, well, if that thing hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here now doing what I'm doing. I'd have stayed there being unhappy as opposed to making a change. Change doesn't tend to occur when everything's like, well, it's okay, I suppose. Change tends to occur when stuff gets really bad. And when you look back and you've got some perspective, it's like, oh, well, that thing kind of had to happen for me in order for me to change. And that's when you start to see these, what you could label as challenges, as gifts. They're gifts for growth.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I think on my bookshelf behind me, there's a book by Daniel Pink called The Power of Regret, his latest one. And he does talk about the fact that, I think they've done some studies, but if you said to people, looking back at your life, there's awful, awful things that happen. If you could take a scalpel and literally cut that event out of your life, but everything else that's related to that event in your life also gets cut out, would you do it? Not many people would. There will be some, and I just want to honour people that have had horrible, horrible things happen to them, and just acknowledge that there are things that are never, ever good and you wouldn't wish on anybody. But most things in life, actually, some good can come out of them, and they lead you onto a different path, and they lead you onto a different trail, and you learn. And this is the thing I have about resilience. This is my beef with resilience, right? It's that bad stuff, she said in inverted comments, failure, going through tough times is just the best way to build resilience, and it's the best way to grow and develop. Now, if I was God or whoever designed us or made us or whatever, that's not how I would have designed it. That's crappy. I want nice things to happen and make me a better person, but it's not often that happens, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's all an invitation to go on this exploration. It's all an invitation to wake up to our true nature. Some of the worst things that happen to people, it helps them to see, underneath all of that terrible experience that I've been having, and if we're, again, sticking with our analogy of left brain, right brain, underneath all of that left brain experience of the analysis of what's happened in the past, there's an absolutely unshakable okayness.
Wow. Well, Giles, on that note, I think we probably need to wrap it up. This has become very philosophical, hasn't it? Again, you can be our resident philosopher. The frog philosophy, be like a wise toad sitting on your lily pad. We always like to finish with the top 3 tips. What would your top 3 tips be for being more right brain? It
would be to learn more about it. Yeah. It's, become more aware of how your brain actually works. It would be to be more aware of what the left brain is, and that you don't have to, just because a thought enters into your head, it doesn't make it true, and you don't have to believe it. That's 2, isn't it? Push me for a 3rd. To know that you're always psychologically safe in the present moment. To really know that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think for me, what's helped me is just that pause button when I find myself, pause, ground. And that just thought, I'm okay now. I'm okay now.
Yeah.
And then trust that intuition, because you're right. The right brain wisdom doesn't come through thoughts. It comes through that feeling, that intuition, that gut feeling of stuff. So trust intuition more. And I'm learning to do that. Although sometimes I have difficulty distinguishing the deep intuition with that fear intuition of, quick, you got to do it. And then you're like, that's my gut instinct. But it's not really, you probably can tell the difference between fear and intuition.
If you find yourself questioning it or analysing it, it's not it.
Ah, okay, that's good. Okay.
It's like you're either doing it or you're thinking about it.
If I'm questioning it, because I think there is that deep knowing that you have, which, I think that's been described so many times by all sorts of religious traditions, by non-religious traditions, but we just don't trust that deep knowing. So really important. Well, that's been really helpful, Giles. If people want to find out more about you, about your work, where can they find out?
My website, there's actually a little video that they can watch. If you go to gilespcroft.com/free, there's a little video about the 2 brain facts that change everything. And there was an episode of Wellbeing Wednesdays recently, if you're interested in the topic of listening to intuition, that's available on my website, along with a host of other topics. Wellbeing Wednesdays have been going for 3 years now, and those can all be found over at my website at gilespcroft.com/wellbeing.
Brilliant. Giles, thank you so much. So we'll get you back again pretty soon, if that's
Thanks.
okay.
So still gunning for the record, yeah.
No, we'll get you to...
It's important to my left brain.
It's been the most
like, it's what's going to make me happy, Rachel.
It will
Nothing
make you
else
happy.
will suffice.
And we might even have an award for you. Like, I don't know.
Oh, man. Oh, that'll do it, yeah.
Yeah, I have to think about what that...
As long as it's not a bottle of wine.
No, it'll be a jar of frog spawn or something. I don't know.
Oh, great.
I'm thinking about doing a little bit of merch. You are not frog merch, so people can have cups on their desk. If you want some merch, let me know. We'll do it. We'll make it done.
Have some frog branded coffee, please.
Yeah, frog coffee. Maybe a frog coffee mug. How would that be?
Yeah, all right.
There we are. Right, Giles, we're going to go. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll speak soon.
Take care. Thanks, Rachel.
Bye.
Bye-bye.